Well, Michigan basketball coach Juwan Howard seemed to lose his cool yesterday in the high-five line after the UW-Michigan game.
Now, as we told you about earlier in the show, he exchanged words and then some with Badger coaching staff, and that started off a brawl.
Here to talk more about all of these, the competitive drive and what leads to people to this kind of activity is Indiana professor of psychological and brain sciences, Edward-Hirt. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Edward. Good to see you.
Have you seen anything like this ever happen before between coaches after the game?
No, not specifically this, but we've certainly seen coaches sometimes lose their cool in various ways against players, against other, even we've seen fans, etc. So I mean, it's not unprecedented that people lose their cool, but this is kind of an ugly incident for college basketball in the Big Ten.
Definitely. This was the biggest sports story coming out of the entire weekend. Why do you think this captured so much attention?
Well, I mean, obviously we're getting to the time when tournament time, and so people are certainly thinking a lot about, the pressure that teams are feeling, et cetera. But, we saw the contrast a little bit to some of the sportsmanship we saw in Olympics. And so then when you see the sort of negative side of sports and people behaving in really, unflattering ways, I think it does capture our attention in the same way.
You often hear people seeing red. Is that a thing?
Emotions do create some pretty awful feelings and reactions in people, and I think we kind of lose control. So I think that there's certainly some precedent to sort of say when people are really that heightened and angry and emotional and stuff that we lose our ability to focus and our vision in terms of what's appropriate behavior.
But as you said, sometimes we're familiar with this happening with players who are sort of in the heat of the moment. The game was essentially over when this happened. Do you think both coaches are at fault?
Well, I mean, if you listen to the stories of recounting it, I mean, one of the big things is that I think sometimes in sports, people feel violated and feel embarrassed. And so we certainly have a lot of unwritten rules in sports of things you do and things you don't do. And people take offense when somebody does something that they feel is inappropriate. So the game was out of, pretty much known. Wisconsin was leading, and they call a timeout late in the game when it's like, just let the game play out. Is that violating some unwritten rule? Possibly, right? It's like you don't steal a base in baseball when you're up by 10 runs or things like that. But do you take offense to that in a way which merits slugging somebody or slapping them? I mean, there's certainly a line there of what's appropriate kind of reaction to something where you feel like someone has violated some of these unwritten rules.
What effect do you think it has on the players to see their coaches acting this way?
Well, that's the most dangerous thing. It's one thing to see a player. We saw Antonio Brown pull off his uniform and just quit on his team, and that was something that got a lot of news coverage too, of seeing a player react so incredibly, crazily, in midst of a game. But to have the people that are actually in charge, I mean, and this is college basketball, these coaches are still coaching, 18 to 22, 23-year-olds and stuff. We think they would be role models and be mirroring behavior for these people who, are still young men that are very much influenced by the behavior of their coaches. So when the leadership does that, that's a little bit even more frightening than I think they have in the players themselves.
And we'll see how the conference reacts and what punishment is handed down. Edward, thanks for being with us today. Very interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks so much.